You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing another Big Finish audio story featuring the 11th Doctor, The Top of the Tree. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or phone case or different kinds of merch by visiting our store at sqpn.com/merch. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Sacred Art, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/art. And they're just starting their third season of episodes, so you should check that out. So this time we're talking about The Top of the Tree. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this one?
This time, the 11th Doctor is traveling with his Christmas companion, Kazran Sardik, from A Christmas Carol. At this point in his timeline, Kazran is a young man. They arrive on a gigantic tree that is so big it generates gravity and atmosphere and doesn't need a planet. On the tree, they find a tribe of human colonists who survived a spaceship crash several generations ago, and they've reverted to a primitive state like Leela's people, the Sevateem. The problem is that the planet is on a highly elliptical orbit, and they're approaching the perihelion, or closest point to the sun. This triggers a cascade of effects in the tree's life cycle. It warms the tree and causes its bark to become soft, releasing oily acidic sap. The tree also emits a signal to call space insects to lay their eggs, and the tree eats the insects themselves with the sap, but lets the eggs survive. Trapped between acidic, oily sap and horrible biting insects, things are pretty miserable for a while. But in the end, the Doctor takes a desperate dive into the sap to get to the TARDIS. He then shows up in the TARDIS and rescues Kazran and the tribe. It turns out that they're near Kazran's homeworld, and the Doctor takes the tribe there to become the ancestors of Kazran's own species and civilization. The end.
All right. So, nice, quick story, I think. Your overall impression of this one?
I was mixed on it. And so I enjoyed it overall by the end, but I thought the middle act dragged. It was, it had some really good stuff in it. The good stuff included Kazran Sardik, which was nice. I was a little disappointed. Now, for people who may not remember A Christmas Carol, it was the 11th Doctor's version of A Christmas Carol, and it's by Charles Dickens, and it's one of the best Doctor Who Christmas specials ever. In fact, I would say it's the best Doctor Who Christmas special ever. Where in the role of Ebenezer Scrooge, we have a businessman named Kazran Sardik, who we meet as an old man. But in order to do the Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present, and Future thing, the Doctor uses time travel to try to reshape Kazran's life. So he goes and meets Kazran as a boy, like 12 years old or something. And then Kazran becomes a companion of his every Christmas. And we get a montage of him and the boy Kazran doing stuff every Christmas, having adventures. And in the course of this, Kazran grows up and we meet him as a young man. And so I kind of would have thought it would be interesting to see Kazran as a boy in this adventure, but given the content of this adventure, it's too grim to have a child as a traveling companion. So we have young man Kazran instead. I liked having Kazran. I liked having the tree environment. There's really good world building here with the idea of a tree that's so big it doesn't need a planet. That's actually been done before in science fiction. Larry Niven's Integral Trees and Smoke Ring novels were based on the idea of an organic environment like trees that didn't need a planet that people would live in. And they were specially adapted to life in those trees, just like these humans are adapted. So really good world building. And this is a low stakes story. The Doctor's just trying to save this tribe. It's, so I like all that. Some negatives on the story, the humor, there's not enough humor in the story. The humor is only at the beginning and a little at the end. The mid part of the story is one, I'm not the easiest way to say it is, even though you'll forgive the one word, is it's one damn thing after another storytelling. It's just misery, 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 misery. And I thought that goes on for too long. There's too much misery in the story. It's too bleak. But it has a nice timey-wimey ending that is also been done before in science fiction, including, it's basically the Adam and Eve plot. And an example of that would be Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. But by the end, I enjoyed it. I just thought the middle act was too long and I wanted more humor. Yeah.
We just did a, I'm my own grandpa story with the 6th and the 10th Doctor recently with the Wink. This is not that, like, he's not his own grandpa, but it is, I'm setting up my own ancestors on my planet. Which is, what you said. I agree with almost everything you said. There were things that I liked about it, but it wasn't great. It felt a little bit like I have a great idea for a story, and it wasn't quite enough developed to make it a full story. Like, it was a very interesting kernel of a story, but to the old Parliament Butterbur expression, too much butter spread over too little butter spread over too much bread. It just wasn't enough for me there. I agree with
especially for an hour. I think they could have done this in 30 minutes and it would have been a lot better.
Yeah, that's true. They could have done more to introduce more like a native character besides awkward. We'll get into that in a bit. To kind of dig into the natives and make them more more
individuals.
Yeah. I mean, there's more that could have been done, and it's kind of interesting that they didn't. This is another one of those. This is the 11th Doctor, not done by Matt Smith, done by Jacob Dudman, who we've heard before, who does an okay job. His impression of Matt Smith is fine, and his cadence. You're right that there isn't enough humor. That's one of the things that really characterizes, especially the 10th and 11th Doctors, but New Who in general, like from the 10th to the 12th Doctors, there's a lot more quippy dialogue and humor, and we don't have enough of that to really feel like an 11th Doctor story.
Yeah, there is a little bit at the beginning, like when they've landed in the tree branches in the TARDIS, and the Doctor they've come here because the TARDIS has picked up something that appears to be a distress signal that they can't fully decipher. And it turns out it's the signal the tree is emitting to call the space bugs. But they materialize in the tree branches, and Kazran is telling the Doctor to be careful as he's getting out of the TARDIS. And you just hear the Doctor say, "Oh, careful is my middle name." And he falls out. And then later immediately Kazran climbs down to help him and says, "You fell out of the TARDIS." And he says, "I didn't fall. I sort of plunged." So that was nice. And then the Doctor has also got his hand stuck in a pod, which we're going to find out is the eggs of the space bugs. And he's got his hand stuck in one that's trying to eat his hand. And Kazran is clamoring around him on the tree branches, trying to get leverage to pull his hand out. And the Doctor is like, "Oh, mind where you put all of you." And that was that was a nice line. There's also a nice callback line late in the story where they're having to deal with the insects, and Kazran says, "It's not like fishing for sharks." And that's a callback to A Christmas Carol, because they have atmospheric sharks that he and the Doctor fished for on his home world.
Right. One of the interesting things is that the TARDIS can't translate the language of the people in the tree.
Yeah.
Because it's not a real language, I guess. They've reverted so much. As he makes reference to, it's the sounds they're making are more emotive noise rather than words with specific meaning.
Yeah, this is stupid. Once you acquire language, you don't lose it, and as a culture. And so even if the the humans crashed on a spaceship several generations ago. Look, you get crashed on an island, you don't lose your language. It'll evolve, but it's not going to go backwards into a pre-human proto-language. That just doesn't happen. So that was stupid linguistically. But it did give them the opportunity to mention the poo-poo ding-dong theory, or theories, which they briefly explain. These are real theories from the history of linguistics. The doctor knows about them. Kazran, of course, doesn't. But the doctor explains that they're from the German philologist, or they're in connection with the German philologist Max Muller, who was critical of an early idea called the bow wow theory. The bow wow theory said that automatopoeia is the basis of language, that all languages started by people using automatopoetic words like bow wow for the sound a dog makes, and the rest of the language evolved from there. And Muller was critical of that. There were a couple of other theories, one of which Muller talked about, called the poo-poo theory, which holds that original language consisted of interjections, like, hey, and stuff like that, things that were functional to get attention and communicate certain very basic things. And then there was the ding-dong theory, which suggested that humans originally were kind of like a bell that could be used to, our speech tracks were kind of like a bell that could be used to imitate all different kinds of sounds. And so these days, now none of these theories in their basic form are considered plausible by linguists. It's more like a combination of them led to the development of human speech.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was curious whether
linguistics are my hobby.
yeah. Whether the Mueller's origin of languages that he references was actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
Okay. That's a fun. That's a whole interesting. Maybe something we could talk about on a different show at some point. The mystery of the origin of languages. But yeah, I mean that's. It is weird, this idea that they lost language, and I think it's an artificial plot constraint, and it just felt a little too artificial.
That was one of my bad notes on that I didn't mention, was because of the linguistic barrier, we have a withholding data mystery. Yeah. Where the natives know more about what's going on, but they can't communicate it to the doctor because they don't have words. And so that puts the Doctor and Kazran and the audience in the position of having to guess what's going on for longer than we should if we had normal speech. Yeah. But at least if they're going to do a data withholding mystery and withhold data on the audience, at least they have a plausible in-world explanation this time, as opposed to just, I'm not telling you.
Right. That has happened in Doctor Who stories before. Yeah. The other thing that the constraint that they put in the story was the usual TARDIS separation trope. Mm-hmm. So, that's one of the things that often comes up in Doctor Who stories. And so we have the TARDIS get kind of buried
by sap.
Yeah. How the way they were describing the rise of the sap was kind of confusing to me, because at first, before we knew it was a planet tree or whatever we want to call it, I thought it was, just a very, very large tree on a planet's surface, and that there was this ocean of black substance, acidic black substance, rising up to flood everything, sort of like the flood of the earth for Noah or something. Is that what the sense you got? Because when it was a world tree, I'm like, then what? That's a lot of sap for it to completely flood.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, but it wouldn't form the way it does on a planet. So on a planet, if you have a big pool of sap, the gravity of the planet is going to pull it down, and it's going to have a flat surface. And that's what they described here, was the sap having a flat surface. But if there's no planet down there, then it's not going to be a flat surface. Things in space tend to be spherical. unless something distorts their shape. And so what you should see from the surface of the tree would be a slowly rising wave of sap rather than just you're looking down at a flat surface of sap.
Yeah. So, but the whole
also the orbit of this tree cannot be that eccentric, or I mean, it can be a little eccentric, but it can't be that eccentric, or everyone would freeze to death in the middle of the the far part of the orbit.
Yeah, at aphelion, it would be way out. Yeah. I mean, it's Doctor Who, so we got to be a little, fairy tale elements,
loosey goosey. Yeah.
But what was I going to say? There is a point where the Doctor has to challenge Kazran to climb down the tree because Kazran's reluctant to climb down to rescue some of these natives that have down there.
In particular, one guy. So let's talk about the natives for just a second. The only one who gets a name is this woman named Awkward.
Yeah,
and she is wearing like the remnants of a spacesuit, and they also meet a guy who gets a bit of a personality. He's the only other one that really has a personality, but he Awkward can speak a little bit. She's kind of rusty with it, but she can speak. The other character doesn't speak, and he's got an earring made from part of his zero-G toilet, and he's got some kind of, I forget what they said it was, but he's basically got a blue coloring in his hair and beard, and so they call him Bluebeard. And he falls into the sap and dies. And the Doctor's trying to get down to him to rescue him and urging Kazran to come along. But everyone else is just, we know there are mothers and fathers and children and old people, but none of them have any personalities.
Right. And the Doctor kind of challenges Kazran's reluctance to go back down and rescue Bluebeard because he thinks that he's concerned of he goes because he's concerned what people will think about him. But Kazran says, no, it's the right thing to do because people need their help. And so I think they're working on this idea that the Doctor developing Kazran into a good person.
It's part of his moral reformation that a project that he's doing on Kazran, so he doesn't end up as a nasty old man who's willing to kill people for no reason.
Yeah, right. So the tree, and we talked about how the tree uses sap to attract bugs. The bugs in space, so the pods travel through space and come to the tree.
No, the tree when it's at this certain point in its life cycle near the sun, the tree emits a signal that attracts the bugs. The bugs then lay their eggs on the tree, and the eggs are able to survive the sap, but the sap digests their parents. So so the tree eats the bugs, but lets them lay their eggs for the next generation.
And there are real insects that are like that, where the whole generation of the parents dies off, and all that remains is the. I mean,
like cicadas.
Yeah. I was just thinking that. So okay.
By the way, one aspect of this I hadn't mentioned. Something that interfered a little bit with my enjoyment of the first part of the story is as soon as they're in the tree, they have these mosquito noises. They're playing in the soundtrack. And I happen to listen, and they're a little distracting. I would have preferred not to have the mosquito noises, at least the whole way through. But part of the reason for that is personal, because recently I had to be out early in the morning with a workman, and I got mosquito bites all over my arms, and they've been itching me for days. And so he listened to this story and hearing these mosquito noises, it's like, it's setting me on edge.
Does Arkansas have, or where you live in Arkansas, have a lot more mosquitoes than San Diego did?
Oh yeah, it has. I mean, they have mosquitoes in San Diego, but apparently I live close enough to a body of water that at morning and they're most active at sunrise and sunset. Yeah, and so I have to watch out for them a little bit at those times.
We have a colony of bats that live nearby, and I love them because bats eat so many mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Bats are our friends. If you see bats, be very grateful.
Yeah. We have bats here too.
Yes. Yeah. Bats are the best. Dragonflies and bats. So we have this pool of oil, sap. I called it oil early on in my notes.
They call it oil.
Yeah. And it's acidic.
Mildly.
So does Bluebeard drown then?
Yeah.
That's what kills him? Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was the weird thing with the doctor.
Yeah, although they also make it's a little more it's visually more dramatic. When something falls in the sap and sinks in it, they tell us that blue-green flames emerge from the sap as it's sinking. So but they eventually realize this sap is enough to irritate your skin. It's acidic enough to do that, but it's not acidic enough to, just kill you outright and eat your flesh off, at least not without a long period of time passing. So presumably the insects, once they get stuck in it, they can get digested over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. But unless you spend a long period of time in it, you're going to be okay.
It's interesting to me how the colonists, or I call them the colonists, the natives, they the way that they sort of survive by climbing up higher into the tree. Because the lower in the tree you are, there's more sap that's raining down on you in addition to have it coming up from below. But they send like the women and children first, then the men, and then the elderly are the lowest.
Right.
Because presumably they're the most dispensable, the most disposable of them all. And so, them having... Because as the people above are climbing, they're...
In terms of ensuring survival, you want the future generation protected first.
Right. Because as people are climbing, they're causing the bark to open up and the sap to rain down. So the people up top are not getting it rained on them as much, if at all. But the people at the bottom are getting it all over them. And so it's interesting that they include this idea that, survival of the next generations, the old people are fine with, being at the bottom to get the others to survive.
It was nice world building. Another nice aspect of the world building is even though they're having to abandon their village, because this hasn't happened in generations. They know something like this happened before and we survived and here's how we survived, but that's about it. If we all climb, the young climb first. But before that, they'd been living in a village, and we get a little bit of audio description of their village, and they've got nests just like birds do for the humans. Right. And that's what you do if you were living in a tree on a permanent basis. You could build nests or tree houses or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, without lumber mills, it would be nests.
Right. Yeah, because in Lord of the Rings, for example, we know that the elves of Lothlorien live in trees, but they have these houses basically built in trees, but they have access to lumber and building supplies. These people do not have any of that, so that would be the way you would do it. So eventually, the Doctor realizes that the only way they're going to survive this is if he can get them off the tree, and that requires the TARDIS, and the TARDIS is submerged
in the sap
some distance, I would think, right? So he has to basically dive into the sap, swim down to the TARDIS, that's a long time for him to hold his breath, and get burned. And so what we have is we have a timey-wimey solution, which is he gets to it, he's injured, he takes the time to go to...
He takes 2 months. Yes. None of this happens in story time. He just shows up in the TARDIS shortly after diving in. He shows up in the TARDIS, and Kazran notes he's immaculately dressed now. He's all clean, and then he reveals he'd spent 2 months at the hospital of the Sisters of the Infinite Schism, who were the nuns that cared for River Song after she regenerated and saved the Doctor's life in Let's Kill Hitler.
Right.
So they were previously established as having the best hospital in the universe, and so the Doctor spent 2 months there to recover, and then shows up all spiffed up, clean clothes, healthy, everything.
it occurs to me that that's a solution that could be used quite often in Doctor Who that they don't use all the time. But,
and Kazran kind of challenges him on it. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. It's a timey-wimey solution. You got a time machine. This is perfectly sensible. But Kazran still feels a little irked that you took a full 2 months of your subjective time. Even though it was no time for me, you took 2 months. And the doctor says, well, there is such a thing as sartorial standards, meaning how you dress.
Right. You could have taken 5 years. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I got here, minutes later. So, and as we mentioned, we have the timey-wimey solution of taking the survivors to Kazran's planet, which is nearby conveniently, because they're in Kazran's past. I forget how long, like hundreds of years or thousands of years.
Well, I'm not sure of that. I know the doctor says, because what the doctor initially proposes is we can take the colonists to your planet in your own time. And Kazran is like, well, my father would never allow that. And he says, your father doesn't have to know. And then they get the idea, let's take him into the past and make them your ancestors.
Right. And that, which is a little bit of a nice dig on his dad, like who would never be happy knowing that. And that's where we basically end the story, and the doctor telling him that he'll never be able to tell his father, but Abigail would love to hear the story.
Abigail, she's the girl in the freezer unit that is the MacGuffin in A Christmas Carol, and Kazran is in love with her. To my mind, the best part of A Christmas Carol, because she's gorgeous. Yeah, and Katherine Jenkins' voice is singing, because she sings in it, is amazing. I actually have her Christmas albums that she did. Oh, really?
After she was on Doctor Who, and her singing is amazing. So, and that brings us to the end of that story. So, any final notes on this one, Jimmy?
No, I thought it was a good story in the end. I just thought the middle act was too long and too miserable. I mean, it had contained too much misery. Not that it was miserably written. It just, oh boy, this is grim. Yeah. A little more humor, I think, would be my suggestion to the writer, that it would have been a little more fun. If you're going to have the 11th Doctor, you got to have a little more humor in it. Yeah, and give the people language, because language is too useful a tool. Once you have it, you are going to preserve it. That's right. And that would let us get to know the natives better and build a more complex society. And make a more interesting middle act. I agree. All right, so that brings us to the end, and this is where we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Daniel S., Denise I., Joseph L., Luis D., and JP. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And as a reminder, every once in a while, I'd like to remind you that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so your donations may be tax deductible. Consult your tax professional. Oh, they are tax deductible. They are tax deductible. Whether if you get a premium, you may need to reduce it by the value of the premium, but the donation itself is tax deductible. That's right. And we'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. So what did you think of The Top of the Tree? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can also watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should comment, like, and subscribe. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the second Doctor story, The Seeds of Death. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who. Thanks, Tom. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I am called awkward. All the best people are.